I'm all-pro cornerback Richard Sherman, and when I'm not chasing receivers, I'm trying to keep up with my kids. That's why Alberto beef jerky is my favorite snack. Alberto is delicious, lean beef, slow cooked and seasoned to perfection, all natural and all delicious. Alberto beef jerky is protein-packed, so I can keep up with my busy. Raiden, stop grabbing your sister's hair.
Alberto beef jerky. You get out what you put in.
Refers to Alberto's all-natural line of beef jerkies. Minimally processed, no artificial ingredients.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
What's going on, everybody? Couple of minutes past 1 o'clock here in New York City. Dan Graca pinch hitting for my buddy, my pal, Stephen A. Smith here on the 11th day of July, 2017, 7/11. How about that? My anniversary, as a matter of fact. Happy anniversary to my wife. She's got to put up with me. We'll take it for the next couple of hours here on ESPN Radio. 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776, the telephone number. As always, you can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca, on a busy, busy Tuesday. All-Star Game festivities will continue later tonight, of course, down there at Marlins Park with the Midsummer Classic. And everything got kick-started last night, really to no surprise, right? As the heavy favorite, the hometown hero, Aaron Judge, went down to South Florida, and, hey, it was bombs away in that ballpark last night. All rise for the Judge once again, hitting 500-foot-plus mammoth shots. And, look, those balls were going pretty far last night from all the participants, but, hey, nobody hits them as far as this guy does, and he did not disappoint. He was the main attraction, the guy that got the top billing going in, and he did not disappoint. So Aaron Judge's legendary, mythical rookie season just soldiers on here, and we're only at the midway point. And I think that if you're a Yankee fan, the only way that you could possibly cap off the hoopla, the excitement, and everything, just to kind of to put a bow on what has already been a special season for Aaron Judge, is if some way the Yankees can find their way into the postseason. I mean, that would really make it sweet. And there's a good chance right now. I mean, his numbers have tailed off a little bit, and certainly, when it comes to winning the Triple Crown, I mean, that's extremely hard to do. And he is going to have to go on a red-hot streak in the second half of the season, and a guy like Jose Altuve, who's leading the American League in hitting, is going to have to come back to the pack a little bit for something like that to happen. I mean, he's almost got like a 20-point lead on him in the batting title race, and Jose Altuve is a phenomenal, phenomenal player. So the Triple Crown stuff, maybe we could table that. That's a little unrealistic because it doesn't happen with a lot of frequency, as we know. But right now, if you were casting your vote for MVP in the American League, who else are you voting for besides Aaron Judge? I mean, Mike Trout has missed 6 weeks. You could have made a compelling argument for him before he got hurt, but right now, Aaron Judge has got to be the guy. So you have a rookie season. Think about just how this whole season has kind of shaped up for Aaron Judge, and if you're a Yankee fan, you've been caught up in the excitement. And I've always thought that as a fan, in whatever sport you're talking about, and whatever team you root for, when team success, player success comes out of nowhere, and when it's completely unexpected, those are always the most fun. Those are always the most gratifying, right? Like when the Jets made that run to the AFC Championship game in 2009, Rex Ryan's first year, rookie coach, rookie quarterback, nobody saw that coming. But as a Jet fan, you were thrilled with that. Now, disappointed that you couldn't finish it off, but the fact that you went all the way one step from a Super Bowl, you got a thrill ride from that. When the Giants won the Super Bowl in 2007, that came from out of nowhere. They won the Super Bowl in 86. They won the Super Bowl in 90. 86, they were 14-2. They were arguably the best team in football anyway. Wasn't a shock that they finished it off and won the Lombardi Trophy. You kind of expected it. You still enjoyed it, but it was expected. 2007, when they upset the 18-0 Patriots, I mean, that was as sweet could possibly be. So those are the typical examples. When the Mets went to the World Series a couple of years ago, you thought that they were maybe a year away, or a year or two away with all those young pitchers. But instead, they got hot at the right time. Those pitchers came of age. They actually stayed healthy as opposed to now, and they made it all the way to the Fall Classic. And when you look at Aaron Judge and what you expected from him at the beginning of the season, this is a guy, remember, last year, in the brief cup of coffee that he had up in the big leagues, he struck out 50% of the time he was up in the batter's box. I'm not exaggerating. 50% of the time. And coming into spring training, the Yankees had a lot of young talent that they promised, or at least they had hoped, would be really key members for them, not just this season, but for several years to come. Gary Sanchez was the guy who, based on his cameo last year in the big leagues, was the one that you had the most anticipation for. A guy like Greg Bird showed you flashes to where you really thought that he was going to be a big-time force at first base. And then Judge was like the wild card. He was essentially the third wheel. He was a guy that, all right, had a lot of ability, had a huge power stroke, but had a lot of holes in that swing. You had to refine it, shorten that swing a little bit, and you didn't know if he would be able to do it consistently enough in spring training to even make the team and break camp and head for New York in April. He did that, and pretty much from Jump Street, he hasn't slowed down. And so you have a guy who not only made the team, he's become the biggest threat in your lineup. He's been an MVP type player in the American League. He goes and wins you a home run derby. He gets 4 million plus votes or whatever it is for the All-Star game. I mean, what else do you do for an encore if you're Aaron Judge? What can you possibly do at this point? And the only thing left is to help get this Yankees team into the postseason. And to say that, it's fool's gold or that's asking for too much, I don't necessarily think so. Do I think the Yankees are the best team in the American League? No, I don't. Do I think that this team is probably playing above their heads a little bit? Yeah, I do. But when you look around the rest of the American League, tell me who scares you? The Houston Astros are really, really good. Okay, the Yankees aren't in the Astros class. They're not. Okay, the Astros are the best team. Doesn't mean they're going to win the World Series or even get to the World Series. That's not the way it works in baseball. But the Astros are the best team. The Cleveland Indians are a team that got to the World Series last year. And they've had some hardships and some things that they've had to overcome this year, like their manager now missing time and having to undergo a heart procedure. And we hope Tito Francona gets back in that dugout really soon and is able to continue on without any obstacles or complications the rest of the year. But the Cleveland Indians, I would have more faith in them in terms of an October March than I do the Yankees. Can the Yankees even surpass the Boston Red Sox now in the AL East? Boston has not hit like they did a year ago. You want to tell me that that's all the absence of David Ortiz and that's the only reason? I don't know if that's the case, but Boston on paper is a better team than the New York Yankees, and yet they're still not running away with this American League East. So naturally you think wild card. You look around the American League, there's only 3 other teams not in first place besides the Yankees who even have winning records. So why can't this team make the postseason? And if you told any Yankee fan that back in March that they would make the playoffs as a wild card, that Aaron Judge would become a superstar, he'd win the home run derby, and oh, by the way, maybe, just maybe, win the American League MVP, who wouldn't have signed up for that? Who would not have taken that in a heartbeat? I'll tell you, a Met fan would take it. You don't have to worry about asking it. They'll take that in a second. But instead, it's the Yankees here who have something good going for them. Now, always when it comes to the home run derby, right, there's always this myth and this worry that the guy who wins the home run derby, or not even the guy who wins it, but somebody who competes and he puts on a good show, that maybe he gets a little too pull happy, he gets a little too homer happy, and then it's going to screw up his mechanics and his swing for the rest of the season. So, I mean, I'm sure that there's Yankee fans who are afraid or were afraid to look at that TV last night when they saw Aaron Judge hit bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb, thinking, oh, here we go. Now the guy's going to go in a 5 for 45 slump. He's not going to be able to make any contact whatsoever. He's just going to continue to swing for the fences. The refinements he made in his swing all throughout the season, that's going to go by the wayside, and he's going to finish the season batting, 260. And he's going to hit maybe only, 5 or 10 more home runs the rest of the year. Relax, okay? I don't think this is going to be a situation like, Bobby Abreu went through back in the day when he won the home run derby. Remember David Wright suffered some of that back in 2006 when he took part as a member of the Mets. I think this guy's too good. I think this guy, it almost seems as if the game comes naturally to him. That's how easy he makes it look here so far in the first few months. And I don't think that he would allow himself to get caught up in the hype. Clearly he hasn't up until this moment. He's not big on self-promotion. Anytime he does an interview, he looks uncomfortable. And if you're a Yankee fan, that is the guy, that is the type of star that you want to build your franchise around. That is the guy you want to be the face of your franchise. Okay, Derek Jeter held that role for almost 2 decades, and he did it as good as anybody. When I look at Aaron Judge, so far, I see a guy who's a reluctant superstar. I see a guy that almost embodies some of those Jeter qualities, the way he conducts himself off the field. Still has a long way to go to be able to reach those levels on the baseball field. But off the field, he's off to a good start. Almost in that Tim Duncan-esque category on how he handled that role so marvelously all those years for the San Antonio Spurs and also winning championships on the basketball court. I wouldn't worry too much. I wouldn't stress out over it if I'm a Yankee fan with what happened last night in the home run derby. You embrace it because it wasn't that long ago. Once the Yankees embarked on this transition and they said goodbye to the Marianos, the Jeters, the Posadas, the Pettits, and those core four guys who, hey, got old. Happens to all of us, right? Got old, had to move on. And now they were ushering in this new brand of Yankee talent, the new guys that hopefully you were going to be able to build around and they were going to win with. Well, I'll tell you, that transition has gone a heck of a lot smoother and a heck of a lot quicker than probably anybody could have anticipated. And a lot of it has to do with Aaron Judge and the fact that he has taken the baton, run with it, led the charge, and been the guy now that the Yankees build around. He is the face of the franchise. He is the interlocking NY. And you got to be thrilled about that if you're a Yankee fan. The home run derby to me, though, last night was interesting because the home run has been really the storyline in Major League Baseball this year. Balls are leaving the yard with record frequency. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing necessarily. Because if you're a diehard baseball fan, and I consider myself one, okay, grew up, Little League, from the time I was 6, 7 years old, loving the game, playing the game, you name it. All right, I'd like to think that I kind of embody some of that old school mentality. And I'm not necessarily a big fantasy baseball guy. In fact, I'm not at all. Don't do it. Don't play fantasy sports. So I know the home run is big for that. And maybe for highlight purposes, you like to see the ball leaving the yard. But I don't have to sit down and watch a baseball game. I don't care how long it takes, whether it's 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I don't need to see a bunch of home runs in order to get satisfaction from it, in order to get enjoyment from it. But there are some people that do. There are some people that feel that baseball kind of necessarily stepped in during the steroid era and turned their cheek to what was going on off the field because McGuire and Sosa were making a run at breaking Roger Maris's record, the sacred home run record. Bonds was ripping the cover off the ball, and countless others in the sport. And it generated a lot of excitement at the time. And then we went away from that, and I didn't necessarily mind it. But now all of a sudden, the game has supposedly been cleaned up drug-wise, and yet all these home runs are happening. Why is that? Rob Manfred spoke about it today, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, down in Miami when he gave his kind of state of the sport address. I'm going to get into some of those things with you, but I want to hear from you, and we'll build the conversation here today this way. The fact that there is this frequent rate of home runs happening, do you think that's good for the game? Does that bring added enjoyment to you when it comes to watching Major League Baseball? Baseball bends over backwards to attract the younger fan, to bring in new fans to the game. Youngsters maybe are a little bit more impressionable when it comes to, hey, the home run. It's exciting. Batting practice, home run derby. That's what they like to watch. But do you truly believe that it's good for baseball? I'll tell you what I think, but I want to hear from you. 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Also, Yankee fans chime in on the phenomenon that is Aaron Judge. And just how far do you think this team could go in the second half of the season? And will it be a disappointment for you if this team does not find its way into October and into the Major League Baseball postseason?
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Talking baseball, talking the home run derby. And I'm kind of curious, how many of you actually watched it last night? I heard the ratings were very, very good for ESPN, like the highest rated home run derby for the network. I think they said since 2009, which is pretty darn good. And clearly it had been billed and hyped as Stanton versus Judge and Judge versus Stanton. And it just didn't disappoint. And the great thing about it was, normally I always thought that in years past, sometimes it dragged on and on and on. And it sometimes went like 3.5 hours and it was as long as a regular game. Last night it ended early. It ended, I think, maybe right around 10:30. So you only had to deal with 2.5 hours. I do a baseball show on MLB Radio, and we were supposed to come on after the home run derby. I had to actually start the show early because the home run derby went quickly. So, but it was a good time. It really was. Now, part of the problem when you talk about home runs and you talk about how far these balls are traveling. You can't use the home run derby as a basis because the balls that they use for that are a little bit different than the ones that they use during the actual games. They're wound tighter. They're supposed to go further. It's just that Aaron Judge's home runs went further than everybody else's. Now, there's a problem engulfing baseball. I say it's a problem. All right. I don't like to see this. I really don't. The way home runs are leaving the yard this year is clearly at a record pace. Did you know that there were more home runs hit in the month of June than have been hit in any month in any year in the history of Major League Baseball? Okay, in a game that goes past the centuries here. June 2017 was the most prolific for home run hitting in the game's history. And look at some of these numbers. Look at some of these home run totals that some of these guys are having. I mean, a guy like Mike Moustakas, I don't think of him as being a home run hitter. He was in the Derby last night. He's not a true power hitter. The guy's already establishing a career high in home runs. He's going to break the Royals single-season record with like 10 or 12 more home runs or something like that. All right, it's crazy what's happening. Look at some of these guys. I mean, Cody Bellinger stepping into the league this year, the rookie from the Dodgers. I mean, he's not – you're talking about guys, a lot of them who aren't built like the Incredible Hulk, but yet they're hitting 20, 25 home runs. It's crazy. It really is. And you can't tell me that there's something not different with the baseballs. Rob Manfred, who is the commissioner of the sport, and by all accounts does a good job. All right, I like Rob Manfred. I think he's refreshing. I think he's trying to grow the game. I think that he's trying to incorporate some new ideas to freshen it up where, look, baseball out of the major sports clearly has this perception that they're too rooted and stuck in the old ways. They haven't adapted. They haven't rolled with the times. Manfred, I think, is trying to do that. Some ideas better than others, of course. He's very big on the pace of play. He got rid of the 4 balls having to be thrown to establish an intentional walk. Just those are one of the things. And there's other, the pitch clocks and all these other ideas that he's trying to come up with to make the game go a little bit smoother because attention spans nowadays in 2017, clearly they aren't what they used to be. I mean, there's so many distractions at our disposal right now. If you go to a game and even if you're sitting at home on the couch watching a game, you got your phone, you got your computer, you got your iPad on your lap, you got your remote control. It's very tough to stay with a baseball game from start to finish and not jump around. And I'm not even just talking about the commercial breaks. I'm talking about just between pitch by pitch. It's that easy to get distracted. So he's tried to incorporate some new things into it, and I wouldn't be surprised. And you could call me a conspiracy theorist. Generally, I don't like to go in this direction, but I wouldn't be surprised if the powers that be put their heads together with some of the guys in the lab who, give the instructions on how to go about designing these baseballs or how to wind the baseballs. And I've spoken to people in the MLB community, people that know people. Certainly they know more people than I do, but still, that there is something going on with these baseballs. And they are wound a little bit differently than in years past. I'm not saying that it's the drug culture again. I'm not saying that there's pharmaceuticals and steroids and all this other stuff that is now crippling the game. I'm not saying that. But the balls are different. If you watch the Met game on Friday night in St. Louis, Jacob deGrom, who you could make every argument should have been an all-star this year. And Jacob deGrom has been pitching so well for the last 4 or 5 starts. I mean, he had an ERA of like sub-1 during that time period. I mean, he's been really locked in. Friday night in St. Louis, the guy gave up 4 solo home runs. And after the game, I thought it was really telling when he met with the media because Jacob deGrom is not a guy who is an excuse maker. That's not him. And after the game, he went out there and said basically, I don't know what's going on. I really have no explanation for it. He's like, some of those balls, when they went off the bat, they looked like they were pop-ups, routine fly balls, and they left the yard. And we're not talking about Philadelphia or Colorado or Cincinnati or some of those other homer-happy ballparks. Okay, this was Busch Stadium out in St. Louis. And he gave up 4 solo home runs. Furthermore, he also got a blister late in the game. And he said, I don't know. I threw 1 pitch and a giant chunk of skin came right off my hand on 1 pitch because of the way the laces were somehow rubbing up against it. Marcus Stroman, who pitches for the Toronto Blue Jays, good young pitcher. In the game he pitched in the Bronx just last week against the Yankees, same thing. Marcus Stroman is not a guy who traditionally has blister problems. And then after the game, and when he was talking with the media, he basically said, I don't know what's happening with these baseballs. I really don't. And I'm not a guy who has blister problems, but you can't tell me that something is not off and something is a little bit different. Because now all of a sudden, he was getting blisters. So it's hurting the pitchers. It's helping the ball go further. It's helping the ball leave the yard. Something is going on. And I found it interesting that Rob Manfred today, when he was talking to the media down in South Beach about the first half of the season, and specifically was asked about all these home runs, and he said that they are going to look into the composition of the bats. They're going to get all the meeting of the minds in a room, and they will look into how these bats are being made. Not the baseballs, but the bats themselves. Why now? First of all, that's my question. Why now? Like, just because we don't have any games for the next few days? Like, the people that were going to be in these meetings, they would have been watching baseball or been at the park or doing something else while real games were going on? I mean, unless you were in a cave or hiding under a rock for the last 3 months. After all, you're the commissioner of the sport. You should be paying attention to what's going on, right? Shouldn't you have known that home runs are happening at a record rate? That has been almost the overriding storyline so far in this season. So why couldn't we have done this last week? Why couldn't have we done it last Thursday or in May or in June? Why now during the All-Star break? You know why? Because they think it's good for the game. You could talk about the bats. You can talk about all these other things. But again, question, why are all these pitchers getting blisters? The pitchers aren't handling the bats. They're handling the baseballs. Therein lies the problem. Give me an explanation. Give me an answer for that. Because, folks, Dan Graca, baseball fan, lifelong baseball fan, does not like it.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
All right, enough of my yapping. Let's hear from you. We will start it off with John, who wants to talk a little bit about those home runs. Johnny, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for taking my call today.
What's up, John?
You have an interesting point, I think, about the balls, and I don't really know too much about that. But what I can tell you is that I think there's a much smarter, younger crop of baseball players coming up through college and starting in high school now, where you're seeing much more data-driven practicing, where you're seeing guys that are learning to swing with a much more athletic style, with the approach angles and the launch angles of the bat and exit speed, velocities being tested all the time. And I think what you're starting to see now is that is being filtered up through baseball now a little bit more than it was in the 90s and 2000s, and which is creating these home run surge numbers that you're seeing. And I think players are starting to actually practice hitting more home runs and trying to elevate the ball, with pitchers throwing harder now than they ever have, and maybe so with the blisters and things like that, maybe being a part of it too. But, people are getting bigger in general, and I think you're seeing a young group of smart, intelligent baseball players who are using metrics, just like golf has for a long time. Football is using it too, and I think you're just seeing more and more of that compared to, years ago when it was basically just, listening to somebody give instruction about, hit this way because I did, as opposed to what they actually did in games when you see guys like, Bonds or McGuire or Griffey, those types of guys that I grew up watching. And more players are trying to emulate what the best players did.
Possibly, but it's one thing to go out there and be a workout warrior and to, use the science and use the analytics. And look, if you have any amount of available information that you can use to enhance your performance, I mean, within the rules, of course, you're going to try to do that, but it doesn't necessarily always translate onto the baseball field. I'll give you these numbers too, John. How about this, okay? 3 years ago, we're not talking about, 1951, 2014. There were only 11 guys in the sport who hit 30 or more home runs. Think about that. 11 guys with 30 or more home runs. Right now, at the All-Star break, at the midpoint of this season, you have about 25 guys who have 20 or more. And so each of those 25 guys are certainly a good bet to hit 30 and clear it. And then you're going to have more guys even below them who are in good shape to even hit that number. So you're talking about possibly even tripling that 30 home run number in just a 3-year span. Something's got to give.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point. I think there's some merit to that. I mean, baseball's been looking for a way to get back in the public eye for a long time. And be a little bit more up to date for the kids coming up, as opposed to football and basketball, which has done a great job. And I think, like I said, I think that more kids are getting smarter about their training, and it has been a big jump in the last 2 years. But we're talking about the best athletes in the world, baseball, best baseball athletes in the world if they can learn to change their movements and improve their swing paths and things like that give them a better chance to hit the ball in the air and hit it harder, then I think a lot of these guys that are the 1% baseball players of the world can perform in much better ways than we might be ever thought that they could, and catch up to some of the pitching that's been dominating for a long time. And yeah, I think the fast or the baseballs could be a way, but I can't really speak on that. But what I can tell you from personal experience is that these kids are getting smarter. They're looking at the research, they're watching the YouTube videos, they're seeing these guys swing up higher than they've been taught to do, and I think it's starting to catch on.
Possibly. I mean, it could be one of the explanations for sure. John, I thank you for the phone call very much. You know, the thing is, as I mentioned earlier about the younger crowd, and whenever you talk to kids or wherever and when I say kids, I'm talking about, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, around that range. So many kids nowadays, and remember, when we were younger, and not to say that I'm an old man, but, I'm going back to my childhood, 20 years ago or whatever. You went out, you played. If there was a game to be had in the summertime, the basketball court, soccer field, whatever. And look, not to say that we grew up in the Stone Ages, no. But now it just seems like with the internet and with every kid's got the phones and the video games, there's just so much other things that you could be doing or they'd rather be doing as opposed to just going out and playing the game of baseball, for example. And anytime you ask a lot of kids about baseball, unless, they were forced into it and started playing it at a young age, the word I hear thrown around a lot, and it pains me, a lot of them say it's boring. I'm being dead serious. You hear kids say that they think baseball is boring. The NBA is exciting. The NBA is built on individual superstars, not baseball. Baseball is built very much around teams, franchises, history, tradition, the Yankees, the Pinstripes, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Dodgers, the Boston Red Sox, some of the historical franchises in the history of the game. And you think about all the guys who wore those uniforms, from year after year after year, and guys who went into the Hall of Fame and, until the steroid era came along and completely squashed the record books. Baseball was the sport more so than any others that was built on history and traditions. Those records were sacred. Everybody knew those numbers. Everybody knew what 61 was. Everybody knew, the Henry Aaron home runs. That's what it was, and now that's all gone. You ask a kid to name the 11th or 12th most identifiable player in the NBA, whoever that might be. You want to say that that's a guy like Paul George. People know Paul George. Paul George is in commercials in the NBA. Most kids know who he is. Who's the Paul George equivalent in Major League Baseball? Wherever you want to put Paul George, where is he in terms of popularity in the NBA? I don't know, maybe, somewhere between 5 and 10 in the NBA, maybe even past 10, somewhere in that range. Whoever that guy is in Major League Baseball, it's probably going to be somebody who's at that All-Star game tonight. Do you think that the average kid is going to even be able to pick him out and know who he is? Mike Trout, here's the example I keep using. Mike Trout, best player in baseball. He's hurt now, but he's the best player in baseball. Fair to say he is the face of baseball? Do we even have a face of baseball? People are quick to anoint Aaron Judge that guy. They think he is going to be the guy that is going to certainly show up in commercials left and right. And most people are going to be able to pick out of a lineup. But Mike Trout is a guy who, for all of his accolades on the baseball field, I know he pops up in commercials here and there, but what kid, even during their summer vacation, what kid on the East Coast is staying up till midnight or past that to watch Mike Trout and the Angels play a game on a Wednesday night? Oh, Angels are playing the Oakland A's out at the Coliseum out there. Game starts at 10 o'clock. Got to stay up and watch it because Trout. Got to watch Trout. Is that happening? No. And there's a lot of things logistically which make it impossible. Baseball, you play 162 games. It's hard to sit there and get every single one. Whenever you have matchups involving superstars, when the Yankees play the Angels, for example, they only meet 2 times a year. It's very hard to say, oh, we need to make sure we get that game on national TV. Well, what if they're playing in the middle of the week? Then they can't be on there's no Sunday night baseball opportunity on ESPN, or you might not be able to get a Fox game on national TV that everybody's going to see if it's not a weekend. Baseball has no control over those things, so you're not going to be able to have Aaron Judge against Mike Trout going head-to-head and stuff like that. And they really don't go head-to-head, right? It's not like one is a pitcher, one is, in the batter's box. They're both outfielders. But whereas in the NBA, if Kevin Durant's team is playing LeBron James's team, that game is going to be featured. That game's going to be, the game of the week in the afternoon, or it's going to be on prime time or something like that, right? They make sure ahead of time they feature those matchups promoting those superstars. Football, right? When Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were the two superstars in the game, whenever Brady's team played Manning's team, that was always the Sunday night game, or that was always, the late afternoon national TV game where everybody gets it in every market. You have to feature the superstars. Baseball can't do that. They play too many games. It's too difficult to be able to set aside one or two particular matchups and say, this is what we have to feature, this is what we have to showcase. So how are you marketing the game? How are you reaching out to those young kids? That's why you look at last night in a home run derby. You look at tonight in an all-star game. Those are some of the few opportunities they have to showcase their stars. And you have to seize the opportunity. Because in terms of gaining a foothold on the younger fan, there's way too much competition nowadays. And in that sense, baseball seems to be falling behind.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shades.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Luke is on the line, wants to talk a little home run baseball. Luke, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Dan, thanks for having me. Doing well.
What's up, Luke? How's things?
Well, things are good. I got a little opinion on this, and I listened to the last guy call in, and he brought up some good points from the hitting standpoint. I definitely think there are hitting adjustments that have been made. I'm not totally – the whole ball idea isn't completely far-fetched. I think there is something to do with that. But I'm going to throw it at a different angle, no pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been some adjustments from the pitching side, too, and I have a good amount of experience with baseball. I played in college, coached in college a little bit, and the amount of difference in velocity in the past 5 years. 5 years ago, you threw mid to upper 90s. You were in a special group of people. Now it's, you got two or three guys in every bullpen that throw that hard, and I see it especially in the developmental side of it. From high school all the way through college, that everybody's just trying to throw hard. And I think pitchers have lost the ability to pitch, and they've turned into more of throwers. And I'll back that up with a guy like Keuchel, who, he's got a low 90s fastball, but he can throw 3 or 4 pitches for a strike. And the amount of stress that throwing this hard has, and all the injuries that have been occurring, and coupled with, leaving their 96, 97 over the middle of the plate. Obviously, the harder you throw, the farther that thing's going to go.
For sure.
And now hitting has turned into, I'm going to swing hard in case I hit it. If I hit it, it's going to go a mile. If I strike out, who cares? Because, the guys who get paid in professional baseball now are the guys that hit home runs.
That is, and like they say, right, chicks dig the long ball, if you will. That phrase has, been around for a long time. And, Luke, thank you for the phone call. Hey, look at a guy, I'll give you another example. Somebody like Eric Thames. All right, Eric Thames is with the Milwaukee Brewers. Eric Thames got out of the chute this year in the month of April, and he had something like 11 or 12 home runs in the first month of the season. On fire. Why was that surprising? Because Eric Thames spent the last few years of his big league, or major league, not even major league, professional career playing in Korea. Okay? And basically the Brewers took a chance on him and signed him to absolutely just, a friendly contract, but he was tearing it up overseas. And they thought, well, maybe we can get something out of this guy. But he had already had exposure in Major League Baseball. He had a cup of coffee with a couple of franchises and did nothing. And that's why he had to go play overseas and play abroad. Now he comes back here, and suddenly he's got it figured out to the point where he's got 23 home runs. Right? He's tailed off a little bit. The pace has kind of gone down from where he was in the month of April. But how do you explain this? Guys coming out of absolutely nowhere, just tearing the cover off the ball. And so much so, somebody like Eric Thames, I mean, it's become a running joke. If you keep up with things on social media, every time Eric Thames hits a home run, there's guys from Major League Baseball waiting for him to be drug tested. Like, he has to submit that many tests because they're trying to get a handle on, well, how is this happening? And he keeps passing the tests. You know, so we're not calling him a drug cheat or anything like that, but there's something else going on here naturally. Carl in Westchester up next. Carl, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm good. But what I'm missing in baseball is kind of the Tony Gwynns and the Greg Maddoxes of my generation, where you had guys who, you know, they weren't blowing the ball by people when they were pitching, and they weren't crushing the ball all the time. You had pitchers, like the last caller said, who knew how to pitch. You had hitters who knew how to hit. And to me, what was always interesting about baseball, and it was always, you know, something always appealing about it, was that it was a thinking man's game. You know, I always told my kids, listen, when you're out in the field, you should always be thinking, what am I going to do if the ball hits me? What am I going to do if there's a runner on first? Where am I throwing it? As a hitter, you know what? There's a guy on second. Should I hit it in this direction or go the other way? And now in this effort, and I do believe that there is an effort, whether it's with the balls being doctored or something, to keep up with some of these other exciting sports that have captured this new generation. Baseball is trying to be more like them, but it's not that kind of game, and it was never supposed to be that kind of game.
Carl, and I have to let you go because I got to hit the top, but I agree with you. You know, baseball is a unique art in and of itself.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Channel 80 and the ESPN app.
I'm all-pro cornerback Richard Sherman, and when I'm not chasing receivers, I'm trying to keep up with my kids. That's why Alberto beef jerky is my favorite snack. Alberto is delicious, lean beef, slow cooked and seasoned to perfection, all natural and all delicious. Alberto beef jerky is protein packed, so I can keep up with my busy. Raiden, stop grabbing your sister's hair.
Alberto beef jerky. You get out what you put in.
Refers to Alberto's all-natural line of beef jerkies. Minimally processed, no artificial ingredients.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
Number 2 here on this Tuesday, 11th day of July. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. Smith, the man, the myth, the legend. We'll go another hour. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776 is the telephone number if you want to be part of the program. Tweet at me. We love the tweets. Hopefully we'll get a chance to read some of them before the show is through. You can tweet me at Dan Graca. That's Graca on the spelling. Talking baseball, talking state of the game, talking home runs, the Derby All-Star game tonight. Certainly a virtuoso performance by Aaron Judge in the home run derby last night. And one thing, look, I understand that they tried to spruce it up a little bit, and it was kind of fixed to make sure that you get Judge versus Stanton in the final. You know, they came up with those brackets or whatnot. But the format kind of stinks, and it's unfair because in that first round last night, Aaron Judge went toe-to-toe with Justin Bour of the Marlins. Justin Bour hit 22 home runs in that first round. The only player to hit more home runs than him in the first round, Aaron Judge, the guy he was going up against, who hit 23. He hit one more home run. So because of that, Justin Bour, who hit 5 more home runs in the first round than anybody else in the competition, didn't even advance to round 2 because he was going up against Aaron Judge. That, to me, is a little unfair. What happened to just taking the 4 best performances and having them advance to the second round? So Justin Bour was done after one tour of duty because he was going up against the Judge. That's a little unfair, but, you know, to each his own, and he'll have to get over that and continue on with the rest of his baseball season. Let's say hi to Jerry, who wants to talk a little baseball here. Jerry, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for taking my call. Listen, I got the answer for you, 100%. Yeah. I have a good friend from high school that is he's an NCAA Division I high mid-major coach. He told me this was going to happen. So you remember 2011, they changed the bats in college. They took away the gorilla baseball and made them switch to the BB Core bats.
Yeah.
Basically took the home runs out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
In 2015, in the NCAA, they quietly changed the baseball on the seams. They lowered the seams so the ball would carry further so they get more home runs back in the college games. The Major League Baseball has quietly adopted those same baseballs.
Mm-hmm.
They've lowered the seams. Exit velocity is the same. Everything's the same. I'm telling you, the ball's traveling. Call it 10, 15 feet further. So that your buddy that said, the guy you brought up at the beginning of the segment, it seems like a pop fly that just carried out.
Yeah.
Exactly. The ball, because of the seams.
Well, that was Jacob deGrom who said it. He's not a buddy. He's a pitcher. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, whatever. I'm telling you, the ball, they've lowered the seams, which also might explain why some of the guys are getting blisters. They've changed the seams on the baseball. That's your answer.
Bingo. I mean, something, like I said, something is different with the way they're wound, the way they're constituted. It definitely is. Jerry, I'm not surprised. Thank you for the phone call. And I could certainly believe that. Something's got to give. And as I said earlier, too, look at the blisters. Look at the blister epidemic with some of these pitchers. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. Joe is in Long Island. Joe, you're up next. You're on ESPN Radio. How are you this afternoon?
Good, thanks. I want to talk about something that really not too many people talk about as far as popularity in baseball goes.
Yeah.
Because I guess it's not, PC or whatever, but how about the fact that about, 30, 40% of the league doesn't even speak English. They switched to ESPN Deportes last night for like 10 minutes. And they were speaking Spanish, and nobody understands what they're saying. So I think people relate to players, and if people can't even understand what these guys are saying, and can't even pronounce their names, I mean, how are you supposed to root for these guys?
Well, how is that going to affect though the way the game is consumed? Like last night, okay, they ESPN gave you multiple broadcast options because there's some people that don't have a handle on the English language, and they're Spanish-speaking folks, and they still like their baseball, and so you have to give them an opportunity to watch the game as they should. But I don't know if that's necessarily cutting into the popularity of the game. I mean, look, whatever fan of a team you are, whether it's the Mets, the Yankees, whoever, all right, if you have a guy on your team and he may not speak English, are you not going to root for him if he hits a game-winning home run, or if he's a pitcher and goes out there and strikes out 12 guys because he can't speak English? Does that affect your enjoyment of the game?
No, it doesn't. But, as far as when you were talking about, like, NBA and NFL, like, people relate to these guys. And if you can't really hear what these guys are saying, I mean, I believe it has an effect. I mean, I blame Bud Selig to some degree, the way he handled the steroid issue and the immigration or whatever, importing these guys from, like, Guatemala or whatnot.
Joe,
it had an effect. Yeah, it had an effect on the popularity.
Joe, I disagree there. I really think it doesn't have any sort of an effect, and I'll tell you why. I mean, this is nothing new. It's been brought up many times before, and I thank you for the phone call. Here's the thing, though. Some of the best players in the game are of Hispanic or Latin American descent. And as I said, I don't care if they talk, they don't talk, whatever. If they're on my team, I want them to go out there and I want them to succeed. I want them to flourish. That's the bottom line. And why are we so consumed, or why should we be consumed about what an athlete says? I mean, most of the time, do they give you anything of substance anyhow? I don't care if you have a guy who could speak perfect English. He speaks the Queen's English. He sounds like Winston Churchill when he's addressing the media after the game. Does he give you anything? I mean, Derek Jeter, God love him, right? Was thought to be the face of the game or one of the most popular players, most charismatic players of the game for 20 years. Did Derek Jeter ever give you anything resembling even close to a juicy quote? Anything that you say, oh, wow. Derek Jeter spoke out of cliches. He played it safe, smart, right? Who needs all that extra aggravation? He left all that other stuff for Alex Rodriguez putting his foot in his mouth. And people hated A-Rod for the most part. Couldn't stand him, but they loved Jeter. So why is it a big deal that some of these guys aren't speaking, or they don't address the media, or they need an interpreter? I don't see it. Kenny in New Jersey is up next. Ken, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Dan?
Good, Kenny. What's going on?
Hey, look, I watched I watched the Home Run Derby last night. I enjoyed it, man. It was awesome. But then, I started looking into it, and I found the alarming stat, and I just wanted to see how you feel about it. There's two major league teams at the beginning of 2017 season roster that doesn't have not one African-American player on it. And then we also got 9 other teams, which includes my Mets, who only have one African-American. And back when Jackie Robinson retired, the year he retired, the league was 6.7% African-American, and in 2017, it's only 7.6 African-American. So I was just calling to find out, what do you think is the reason why the African Americans aren't, getting into baseball more?
It's an interesting dilemma, Kenny. All right. I'm not a sociologist. I can't sit here and pinpoint one particular direction. All I could do is offer you some ideas and things that I've been heard thrown at me. Look, I've been doing this now a few years. Okay. I've been in terms of, being a talk show host. Okay. I've done many a show, and this is a topic that's been brought up often. And just from getting the feedback from listeners and from people who maybe this particularly relates to, the things that I hear often from them are, and it's not even so much an African-American thing, a white-black thing, or anything like that. Let's just examine baseball at its root level, okay, Kenny? Think back to when we were kids, okay? The most difficult thing that if you want to organize a game with your friends, okay, you want to play baseball. You wake up and say, hey, you know what, the weather's great outside, got no school, let's go play baseball. Great. All right, let's play baseball. Somebody got a bat? Okay, everybody got gloves? Great. Do we got balls? Okay. Now, how many people can we find? You need a bunch of guys to go play a pickup baseball game. Are you going to be able to make that happen? Are you going to be able to find a patch of land where you can play a baseball game? If you don't grow up in an area where, if you grow up in the concrete jungle someplace, where are you going to be able to find a baseball field? Or where are you going to be able, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of obstacles that just stand in your way there. I remember, there were times because, we were nuts when it came to baseball. We loved playing. Me and maybe even just like one or two of my friends, we would go out and one guy would pitch, the other guy would go up there and take batting practice, and then one guy would be in the field. Okay, that's great. We only had about 5 baseballs, and after you took about 5 swings and hit the ball, then you had to stop the game. You all had to run out and find wherever the ball was and track it down, and it was tedious. You didn't get any enjoyment from it. Let's take basketball for an example. What do you need to play basketball? Need a ball? Need a hoop. That's it. You don't need another human being. You could go out there and you can shoot around, and you could be out there for hours and hours and hours by yourself. Maybe somebody else comes along. You get a pickup game going. Maybe do a run of full. You play a little 3-on-3, whatever. A lot easier with basketball. Even if you want to play like a pickup football game, just need a ball. That's it. Have a few guys play in the street, whatever. Baseball, it's a little bit different. And if you want to talk about, if you're a gifted athlete, okay, if you really are special, if you're talented, if you got options, if you're a 2 or a 3 sports star to some degree, and you play basketball, you play football, you play baseball, and you're really good to the point where, you know what, maybe, just maybe, shoot, I can do this professionally. I got a shot to even go all the way in any of these sports. Dave Winfield was one of those guys, right? Dave Winfield was like a draft pick in all 3 of those sports or something like that. He was that freakish of an athlete. That's just one example. But what's your quickest way to pay dirt? What's the quickest path? It's not baseball. It's not. You have those few examples that guys sometimes don't spend a day in the minor leagues. They're drafted, and then boom, just like that, they're in the bigs. It happens. But a lot of these guys, you could be a first-round draft choice. You can sign, you get your signing bonus money or whatever, a couple of $1 million, that's nice. But what happens if it doesn't work out for you? What happens if you're toiling in the minor leagues forever? What happens, God forbid, you suffer an injury, and therefore, if you're a pitcher, for example, you suffer an arm injury, and then you can never pitch again. Then what do? Then your career shot. Basketball, on the other hand, if you're really, really good, now the rules that are afforded with the NBA and the one and done in college, you could go to college for a year, you could play, and then boom, you're in the draft, you sign your first contract, your first-round pick, you're a millionaire, you're set. Football, same thing. Play a few years, boom. There's no minor leagues for the NFL. You're good enough, you get drafted, you're in. Baseball, there's no guarantees. Now, the money's great. And up until the last couple of years, when these contracts that the NBA teams were handing out to their players just absolutely knocked you on your rear end, and you said, oh, my goodness, these are marginal players who are getting $60, $70, $80 million. Where do I get that job? All guaranteed, nonetheless. Baseball's guaranteed money, yeah, but you got to make it. And you got to be pretty good. Right? They don't hand out $80 million to a utility player on the bench. But if you're Otto Porter Jr., who's the third wheel on your team, and you get a $104 million contract or whatever, that's good living. If you're Tim Hardaway Jr., who not too long ago was in the D-League and has bounced around now from team to team, and he gets $71 million, that's good living.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Read some of these tweets, and you can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca. Juan says that growing up he used to pitch one-on-one. You throw it a strike zone painted on the wall at the schoolyard on the court. I did the same thing. You go to the school in the parking lot, and they had the big rectangle or whatever it is on the side of the brick wall there. You had the X in it. That would be like the strike zone. And you could play a one-on-one game. One guy pitches, one guy hits. We used to play that all the time. I wish you saw more kids doing that more, though, unfortunately. Joe, our buddy the Graphics Joker, says that's one of the reasons that U.S. soccer is struggling so bad. Imagine all the young kids, didn't want to play football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. And look, youth soccer is very popular, right? In this country especially, and you have a lot of kids that engage in that. And they think that is more exciting than playing baseball. They think playing lacrosse is more exciting than playing baseball. Why? Because you're always running around. You're always part of something, right? You're always chasing that ball. Where baseball, there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of standing around. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. It's something that I'd hate to say is an acquired taste, but it almost is for a young kid. I grew up at a very young age playing it, from the time I was 6 years old in the Little League. So it was always something that I loved from a very early point in my life, but I also played soccer too. And that's one of the reasons why if you look to U.S. soccer, not to make this a soccer discussion, but, why isn't our national team better than it is? Why isn't our national team more competitive on the world stage? Why can't we ever get to a semifinals in the World Cup against some of these other countries? Because, and I say this all the time, we have some nice young players, but if you look at the best players in the world, right? Whether it's, you want to go to the top of the heap with the Messis and the Ronaldos, playmaking midfielders. Where are those guys in the United States? When are we developing those guys? Where are those players? You know who those players are? Those are the players that are going to have to grow up playing soccer only, right? From a very young age, which means they have to shun football, they have to shun basketball, baseball, hockey, all these other sports, and dedicate themselves to soccer. There's way too much competition in our country. But if you go around the world and you look at some of these other countries, these so-called soccer powerhouses, yes, they play other games, but it's not soccer. Soccer is religion. Soccer is breakfast, lunch, and dinner from them. Okay? They are rooted in that. That is their obsession. That is their goal. When they talk about becoming a professional athlete, they mean becoming soccer players. That is the minority here in the United States. Not to say that it's not popular, but more people are consumed with basketball, football, baseball, hockey, on and on and on. So there is a lot of different things now, activity-wise, that these kids are getting into. And it's affecting, I think, certainly how they develop a love for some of these sports. Gabriel's in Burbank. He's up next. Gabriel, good afternoon. How are you?
Hey, Dan. Thanks for the Vine. Great show, man. Heaven forbid somebody talked about baseball.
What's up, Gabe? How are you?
You're going to see a big change over the next couple of years in baseball because you guys are talking about it more. The problem is that baseball doesn't allow its participants to have an on-field personality. Basketball, guy hits a three-pointer, hits the shot, turns around, points to the camera, the crowd goes crazy. Football, you tackle the quarterback, you jump up and down like you won the lottery. But Yasiel Puig legs out a long single into a double, pumps his fist, the next guy is going to get hit in the neck with the fastball. These unwritten rules about not being able to celebrate, not being able to have a personality, they're killing the sport. And if we're doing the wave at the park, you know that something's wrong. So tell me I'm right, Dan.
Gabe, I agree with you. That's a good one you bring up, and I forgot to throw that into the conversation. I like the whole unwritten rule thing. I think that it's something that's antiquated. It's archaic, and it's something that we have to move on from. Bryce Harper is another one of these young guys, right? Bright young stars of the game, one of the so-called marketable players in Major League Baseball. He speaks about it all the time. Baseball's too boring. Baseball is still too set in its ways. And, as we said, if a guy, God forbid, if he looks at the ball too long after it jumps off his bat, if he isn't quick enough out of the batter's box, or if he isn't quick enough around the bases when he hits a home run, they're going to throw at him the next time. Why? You got a problem with it? Then get him out. Get him out if you don't like it. And that's one of the problems that I think a lot of people still can't get past in terms of baseball. Well, where are these rules? I never saw them. And if they're rules, and if they've been part of the game for so long, you know what? Let's not make them unwritten anymore. Somebody take out a pad, somebody take out a piece of paper, get a pen, and write them down. Put them into law. How about that? I'm tired of the unwritten rules, and you're talking to a baseball lover. but I hate it. Eduardo Perez, another guy who loves baseball, ESPN baseball analyst, joins me in a couple.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
All-Star break is upon us. All-Star festivities will wrap up tonight with the actual game down in Marlins Park. You had all the excitement with the home run derby last night, which was won by the Yankees' Aaron Judge. Eduardo Perez down there took in all the proceedings. Will again tonight, of course. The excellent baseball analyst for us here at ESPN, and he's nice enough to give me a couple of minutes here on what I'm sure is a busy day. Eduardo, it's Dan Graca. Thanks for a couple. How cool was it to be part of that environment last night?
Unbelievable. It really is, Dan. Thanks for having me. I'm surprised I still have a voice left. As hoarse as it is, I'll be honest with you. It's awesome to be down here in South Beach right now, watching the power yesterday of the anticipated matchup of Stanton and Judge, which did not come to fruition. But what did come to fruition was the power given not only by Aaron Judge, but also Justin Bour. Gave him a run for his money in the first round, getting the fans excited with 22. And Aaron, not only did he get 23, he said, you know what, I'm going to win by 2. Let me give you 24. And then from then on, it was just his show, and everyone else, and 36,000 people that were in attendance were there also just anticipating the power that from what we saw. It was great.
You know, we always talk about, Eduardo, the faces of certain sports, right? In baseball, there's, you know, kind of this, we always throw a lot of guys out there, you know, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, guys like that, young marketable stars. Aaron Judge is clearly, with his performance this year, vaulting himself into that conversation. How important is it, or how, you know, do you think it's vital for Aaron Judge to kind of cement himself as now one of these new young superstars in baseball to be able to market?
Well, he's putting himself in a great spot. Let's put it that way. You know, coming out of into spring training, the Yankees did not have a clear right fielder. It was a battle of errands. It was between Hicks and Judge who would win it. Both of them had a great spring training. The upside and the challenge was, if you're going to have them both make the team, Aaron Judge would then get the nod, and that's what he did. And ever since he got into that opening day lineup in the 8th spot, he took off. It's been an unbelievable transition to the player he was last year that we saw swinging a lot of pitches out of the zone, to all of a sudden becoming that 3-hole hitter for the Yankees. Yes, you're right. It's going to take time. I think we can't just rush to judgment and put him in the same sentence of Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, both guys that have won MVPs. But he's definitely getting up there. I think right now he's in the range of the Carlos Correas and Francisco Lindor's, guys that they're going to be superstars, are going to be the face, but give them time to be able to do so, and they're coming at an accelerated, rapid pace to become those young players.
And the more and more you see of him, Eduardo, you start to now gain a sense of early in the season how some of the guys that cover the Yankees on a day-in, day-out basis were actually throwing out the Derek Jeter comparisons, which was kind of blasphemy, but now you start to see it, that he's got a good head on his shoulders, he comes from a good family, doesn't really get caught up in all the self-promotion, and would rather have anything except a microphone in his face or a camera, showing him there. So, I mean, this is a guy who gets it, and he keeps it all in perspective, which is refreshing, instead of just the me self-promotion, which we see with a lot of these athletes.
Dan, I love what you said right there about the family. The family did an unbelievable job. This all has a great foundation, and that's where it all started. College educated, going to Fresno State, humble as can be. When you interview Aaron Judge, and if it's just you with, let's say, your producer, your cameraman, your your mic person, he will not start talking to you until he says hello and gets everyone's name around him. That's the type of player he is. Yesterday, during the home run derby, not only was he sitting around his fellow colleagues, all-star players, but also around the brothers, friends, talking to them during the derby itself. It's wonderful to see. The personality is there, yet the seriousness of his job and task in hand and focus is also there. He thinks about every question that you ask him before he answers if it's a right or wrong way. He understands that a lot of the weight is on him because of the market he's in. And right now, you have to give him an A+ for his attitude and his and the way he has gone about the business in the Big Apple.
Eduardo Perez, our guest here on ESPN Radio. How about the city of Miami down there and the Marlins organization, Eduardo? Clearly you have ties to the franchise there. And, you know, when I watched last night and clearly what we're going to see tonight, I can't understand it because they have a fairly new ballpark down there. Now, clearly the taxpayers weren't a fan of it. And, you know, there's been many things written about all that, but my goodness, they can't draw flies ordinarily for the Marlins games. But then you see that place hopping like it was last night. It was crazy during the WBC when you had the Dominican team playing down there. There is a baseball community, a vibrant one down there, and the Marlins have some good, young, exciting talent. Eduardo, help me figure out why the fans don't come out to support that team and pack that ballpark to watch Major League Baseball on a more frequent basis.
It's a tradition. You know, this is an organization. Yes, they've won 2 World Series, but as young as the organization is, when they've won, they've dismantled the team. It's gone through various owners. I think an ownership that is from the South Florida area that understands this market, that knows and has to put a winner in here, has to be very savvy when it comes to business, but at the same time has to be able to put a winner out on the field, and that's what fans want to see. We've seen attendance skyrocket in different places. If it's Pittsburgh when it struggled, and Cleveland when it struggled. When you start putting winners out there, in the mid-'90s, Cleveland sold out every game. Now they're starting to come back because of the product that you have on the field. Exciting young players that know how to win. I think the Marlins, yes, they have exciting young players. They had one in Jose Fernandez, which will be celebrated in a tribute tonight here at the stadium. But they lost them here in Miami. I can say we because I was very attached to Jose also. It's difficult to be able to have young talent. It's great to see, but if you don't win, the fans aren't going to come. Now they have to be able to turn that corner and win ball games. As sexy as their outfield is, with Yelich, Ozuna, Stanton, you need to put a winner out there. And eventually, once they do, I think the fans will start showing up big time because the stadium is beautiful. It's wonderful. And with all the rain in Miami and humidity, if you're my wife, you're not going to come if this isn't a roof. You need the hair to be taken care of. I'll tell you right now, air conditioning will take care of that.
Absolutely.
And Latino women need their hair done right.
I don't think they have to be Latino. I think maybe they're all falling into that category, Eduardo. But, the other thing, too, which probably complicates matters, at least for the time being, is you have this pending ownership change with Jeffrey Lurie selling the team. There's been reports now that they're going to have a sale in place. So you never know about the uncertainty. They might be having some sort of a mini fire sale, too, to shed some of these contracts to make the sale a little bit more appealing. And whenever you talk about money and contracts with the Marlins, you start with a guy like Stanton who signed the ridiculous contract. Sure, exciting young player, but makes a ton of money. I think there's a lot of fans for what happened previously with this franchise that maybe aren't so sure he's going to be a Marlin for life.
Yeah, that part you don't know. And obviously he has an option most likely that he'll stay in Miami because it's heavily backloaded. And the new ownership that comes in will have a decision to make. And you never know if that's a stipulation that they have. Listen, we'll buy if this happens, if that happens. There's a lot of reports from 3 different groups that we've heard Commissioner Manfred already say that there's 3 groups that they're evaluating, that also Mr. Lurie is evaluating the background checks when it comes if they have the funds or not, and what their plan of attack is. If you talk to the people in Miami, and obviously I live here, I spend a lot of time with them. They want the Jorge Mas group to be the group. Because they feel that he has a feel not only for South Florida but also for the fan base. He's been a Marlin fan since they came in 1993. The family, Cuban American, they have a lot vested in the South Florida Miami region. They understand the market. They're good businessmen when it comes to Mastech Corporation. That's who the Marlin fan base wants. Now there are 2 other groups that don't live in the Miami area. One led by Derek Jeter, but we'll see. The other one, the Romney Group. It's going to be interesting to see who Jeffrey Lurie does choose, depending on the amount and depending on the game plan that they have for the Miami Marlins' future.
Last thing I'll finish on this, Eduardo. We've talked a lot about it on the show today. It's certainly been a topic of conversation all throughout the baseball season, as I'm sure you're well aware of. and that's these home runs. The ball is leaving the yard at record rates so far this year. And look, there's been a lot of pointers to, it could be this, it could be that. And, I've heard that the baseballs are wound differently, and that's contributing not only to the ball going further, but really with the increase in a lot of these blisters that these pitchers are getting on, just by handling these baseballs on a day in, day out basis. Do you think that this is healthy for the game moving forward if it's going to continue like this?
Well, this is what happens. A lot of people have to understand that they wonder if the ball is doctored or not, if it's different than it was in the past. You know what is different? The power that the pitchers possess. And we've already proven that it doesn't matter if the guy throws 98 or if he throws 88. Still, the exit velocity and the power is supplied 85% of the time by the hitter. So that's a wash. But what isn't a wash is that teams are looking for power. They're looking for 97, 98 miles per hour. But when you have a pitcher on the mound that can supply that power, you're going to sacrifice something. And what you're sacrificing is location. You're sacrificing soft contact, the execution of being able to do that. But Greg Maddux was a master of that. He didn't need to throw 95 to be successful. He knew how to execute soft contact. These young pitchers that throw hard, they don't know how to execute soft contact. You look at the videos of the home runs, they're mostly missed location, meaning they're mistakes. And major league hitters, they will hit mistakes. And with the launch angle, with the way that they're now adjusting to developing their swing, it's a perfect recipe for a lot of home runs. And that's exactly what's happening in today's baseball.
Yeah, some of them, like, you've already heard some of these pitchers say that, I thought off the bat it looked like a pop-up and ended up going off over the fence. So, it's happening a lot, and it looks like it's not slowing down anytime soon. That's for sure. Eduardo Perez, ESPN baseball analyst. Thanks for a couple of minutes, Eduardo. Enjoy the festivities tonight. It should be a good old party down there in Miami. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shades.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
As always, you can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca, on the spelling. Let's say hi to Cody. Wants to talk a little baseball. Cody, how we doing this afternoon?
Pretty good. How are you, man?
Good, Cody. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm a baseball guy. I played high school baseball, played college baseball. So to me, I can't see how the sport is boring at all. But to make a point for people that do say it's boring, you got your Mike Trouts, your Bryce Harpers, your Aaron Judge. You might see them in the first or second inning. And then if it's a pitcher's duel, you may not see them again until, the fifth inning or so. That's a problem that cannot be fixed. I think that is the main problem. I don't even think it's a matter of how many games they're playing. It's that the main stars, you can't showcase them enough.
Fair enough. And like you said, as I alluded to earlier, it's a different game. It's a unique game. It's not necessarily a one-on-one battle. There could be some situations in the game where guys aren't necessarily allowed to showcase their talents. I mean, I don't think if you're a fan or if you're watching, for instance, Aaron Judge, you tune in to see him hit a ball and you want to see him hit one over the fence or whatnot. Well, what happens if in a late game situation the team decides, well, we're not even going to pitch to him. We'll just put him on first base, issue the intentional walk or something in that regard. There is strategy that factors into these games.
Oh, exactly. I understand completely, and I get that. Like I said, I'm a baseball guy. I can watch every game and not have a problem with it. But for the people that you want to try and get to watch the games, it's hard for them to stay locked in if they're watching one guy and they see him once or twice a game. And then you said in the late innings he gets walked. It's hard for new people to get locked into that.
Yeah, Cody, and I thank you for the phone call. I agree. Look, if you're a fan, you're a fan, right? You grew up with it. You like the game. You appreciate the game for all of its majesty and even the good, the bad, the things that you'd like to maybe see improved. It's all part of the territory, right? It's no different than in life. We all have our flaws as human beings. But, you're friends with somebody a long time. You have relationships with people. Yeah, there's some things you'd like to change. There's some things that people would like to change about you. But you roll with the punches. That's life. A couple of people have tweeted at me throughout the show today when we were talking about baseball and athletes and, how it could be a little bit more appealing as kids are growing up and playing it or whatever. And, it's been broached a couple of times. What would happen if some of our great athletes, non-baseball players in sports today, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Odell Beckham's, guys like that, the real special athletes. Well, what if those guys ended up playing, sports like soccer, for example? Would we be a better soccer nation, right? Would our national team be more formidable if our best players were sticking to soccer as opposed to all the other opportunities and other options that have come their way? And I say I don't necessarily think so. I really don't. Because it's one thing to be a great athlete, but it doesn't mean you're going to be a great athlete at everything. There's a select handful, but it's not everybody. It's hard. Think about all these other athletes, and the thing I keep coming back to even with baseball, think about some of these guys, and they make a folly of it, and they're quick to show the highlights on TV, and everybody has a laugh, and they go viral, but how many of these guys get called out to throw the first pitch out in some of these baseball games? Some of the best players in their respective sports that we have. I mean, throwing a baseball from point A to point B, I'm sorry, it's really not that difficult. And if you're coordinated enough to be successful at some of these other sports, then it should be like riding a bike. But how many of these guys throw the ball either they can't even reach home plate, they throw it 15 feet wide of home plate, they throw it 15 feet over home plate. Come on, right? They're not winding up and, having to throw a 95-mile-an-hour heater that paints the corner. No, you're just lobbing it to the plate, and they can't even do that. And they don't look very coordinated doing so. Joe in New Jersey is up next. Joseph, good afternoon. You're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, Dan, this has been a great few hours of ESPN Radio. Thank you.
No problem, Joe. Thanks for calling. What's going on?
You know what? I'm thinking back, and these guys have made some great points, a lot of callers. I think back to the summer of 1998. Mm-hmm. I was might have been about 12 years old. I could not, every morning I'd go straight to the TV for SportsCenter. See how guys like Mark McGwire did. See how Sosa did. Greg Vaughn, Cal Ripken Jr. I begged my dad to go to, Yankee Stadium to go see Ken Griffey Jr. play. The networks are not doing a good job, I don't think, anymore of promoting these superstars like they have in the NBA and the NFL. And a lot of callers have made this point, but I think what it comes down to is it'd be great if, ESPN and Fox Sports, if they could, update the home run totals every time. The first 5 or 6 stories are rarely baseball on TV. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's what's really going to change turn the tide and really help baseball out is if everybody really gets on board in promoting these superstars. So thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Joseph, thank you very much for chiming in here today. And I think that, what the problem is in that sense is that the frequency of the game, right? To the average fan or the casual person, you play 162, you say, well, they minimize themselves in importance. Whereas a football game, you only play 16, so it has to be important. You only get so many opportunities. Baseball, if you lose today, you don't see something today, well, you know what? There's always tomorrow. There's plenty of time to catch up. I think that's why it is.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Channel 80 and the ESPN app.